A little bit more practical, a little bit easier for you. So I'm going to take you through what is Single Touch, how do you comply with it, what does it replace, because hopefully there's a few things you can stop doing because of Single Touch, how do you change to Single Touch, and a couple of screenshot examples for you. So what is Single Touch Payroll? It's this buzzword going around that people are talking about, but there's a bit of perhaps lack of clarity. What actually is it? The point to take away from this is it's a new way of reporting information to the ATO. It's no change to how you calculate the amount of money you're going to pay. It's no change to how you pay your PAYG instalments. It's no change to how you pay your staff. It's no change to how you give your pay slips to your staff. It is only a change to the way you report to the ATO the wage information as you make payments. So that's the most important thing to take away from this. It's something that your payroll software will do as you process your payrolls. Essentially, you do, for anyone who's using a payroll software, you do what you currently do, you get to the end, there's a button that says File, you click the File button, it gets uploaded to the ATO, and you're done. It's not meant to be particularly complicated or difficult on an ongoing basis. It's just another button to click in your software, and your software handles it talking to the ATO in the background. When you have to start applying it is based on your staff headcount as of 1st April 2018. So if you had 20 or more staff, you have to implement it. 19 or less, you've got a little bit longer. So for those with 20 or more staff, 1 July 2018, you should already be using Single Touch Payroll to report. So if you're not already doing it, if there's special circumstances, you can get a deferral. Otherwise, just start reporting. It's not meant to be particularly difficult. If you're in the 5 to 19 employees category, 1 July 2019, you've got another week, and then you have to implement it. You can do it early if you want to. There's a few, they've sort of given you that 1 July to 30 September as a grace period, so if you're still struggling to get around it, you've got a little bit of grace there. But once you do start, you have to continue with Single Touch Payroll. And there is the ability to apply for some deferrals or exemptions if you've got special criteria. One of those that might apply is if you don't have reliable internet access. It is a category that allows you to not have to report. So it could be someone, if they're running a farm in quite a remote area or a remote Aboriginal community where there is no reliable internet access. At the moment, that's going to allow you an indefinite deferral. You just have to let the ATO know, we're not doing Single Touch because we don't have reliable internet. There's nothing you can do about that until you do get reliable internet. And for those micro or the small employees, the 1 to 4 category, you still have a start date of 1 July 2019, but there are a few extra deferral options that are available in those cases. And there's also a few special payroll software specifically designed for this group to be quite affordable. So what the ATO came out and said is they said there are some organisations that are not currently using a payroll software. We don't want to force them into changing from manual cash ledger books to MyOb or Xero just because of Single Touch Payroll. If it might be a tradesperson who just does manual handbook entries, or it might be a small hairdresser salon where they're looking to retire in a year's time. They don't want to learn a new software just for a year so that then they can retire. The ATO said, for that group of people, we need a category of softwares where it costs less than $10 a month, can be done within 5 to 10 minutes, is easy to do, and you can lodge your Single Touch Payroll. So there's about 50 odd different providers that have got softwares available that will meet that category. There's a whole list of them on the ATO website. So for anyone in that category where they're not already using MyOb or Xero or one of those, you can use one of these other softwares that makes it all that much easier. A lot of them are smartphone based, you can just type in the numbers and hit submit. The timing of reporting. So the report, your Single Touch Payroll reports, they're due to the ATO on the day that you pay your staff or earlier. So you can submit it earlier, but by the day that you send the money or give the cheque to your staff members, you have to lodge your Single Touch Payroll that same day. Can't do it later. And that covers things like salary, wages, directors' fees, all the deductions that are in that. You're also, as part of that, reporting the PAYG withholding and the superannuation information. But the good news is you don't have to do payment summaries at the end of the year. So come the end of the year, because every payroll you've uploaded the details, there is a finalisation process, but what some people call a group certificate or a PAYG payment summary, you are not required to give that to your staff any longer once the details are lodged through Single Touch Payroll. So this is something you have to look at. Think of it as a switch on, switch off. It's one or the other. So from the ATO's perspective, PAYG payment summaries, Single Touch Payroll. They're two separate softwares, two separate systems, and they don't talk to each other. As government, would you expect anything different? What it means though is the date that you start doing Single Touch Payroll. Anything prior to that date that you've lodged with payment summaries stays in payment summaries. Anything after that date that you do on Single Touch Payroll stays in Single Touch Payroll. You might have situations where a larger organisation might have different payroll softwares for different staff. There is that possibility you could have some staff that you're giving payment summaries to, some staff you're giving Single Touch Payroll data to, or there could even be one staff member who gets maybe their reportable fringe benefits on a payment summary and their salary and wages through Single Touch Payroll. So there will be, the important thing there is not to duplicate. So if you put the salary and wages through Single Touch Payroll, do not also put it on a payment summary, because then it'll get reported twice to the ATO and doubled up, and the ATO will think, look, this guy got a good pay rise, is now getting doubled. And it'll cause problems with the tax return at the end of the year. So think of it as that switch on, switch off. You stop using payment summaries, you start using Single Touch Payroll, one or the other.
So we were thinking whether, because it's the first year, that we still send out payment summaries. Will that cause a problem? We are using STP.
If you want to print the payment summary in terms of a piece of paper and give it to the staff, you can still do that to help ease the transition, but don't take that Intube file from your payment summaries and upload it to the ATO. What you do need to be saying to your staff though is highlighting to them this change and saying, we're moving from payment summaries to Single Touch Payroll, and that as a result of that, instead of getting payment summaries going forward, you need to log into your MyGov account and access the information there. So when the staff members log into MyGov, they'll actually then see the information coming through directly into MyGov. It'll pre-fill. Throughout the year, they'll be able to get some access to it. And come 1 July, if the data's already there, it'll flag it and say not yet filed. So if the staff members want to submit their tax return early, the data's there, but then they have to click an extra declaration to say, I know this information is not final, but I want to submit my tax return anyway. From the employer, once you've done all your reconciliations, you're happy that everything's right, then you'll advise the ATO, this is now finalised, and it will then flag it to the staff again. It's available through that MyGov portal to the staff members. Have had the question, what about people who don't have MyGov? There are some people that don't. In that situation, then from the staff members, from your employees, they've got the option of, if they're using a tax accountant to do their tax return for them, the tax accountants are able to access that Single Touch Payroll data directly from the ATO. So if this employee doesn't have MyGov, the tax accountant can. And if you don't use a tax accountant and you don't have MyGov, then you have to phone the ATO, sit on hold for an hour and a half until they answer your call, and then they'll be able to tell you over the phone the information so that then you can do your tax return. Don't know why anyone would want to call the ATO, but the option is there. So you can see they're really pushing everyone to say, get on MyGov, because that's how the system is designed to work. The thing to be aware of is the data matching that's going to come through. So you can see that this will give a very, very powerful data set to the ATO of information. They will, every week, every fortnight, as you process your payroll, they'll have the details of what has been paid to who, how much super should have been paid to who. And so then they'll actually start matching that to other records. So for instance, if you through Single Touch Payroll are reporting this employee should have this much superannuation paid this quarter, and then a couple of weeks later, the super funds will be reporting to the ATO the contributions they've received per employee. The software's then going to match that up. And so if you've reported your superannuation and haven't paid it, you can start to expect automated letters from the ATO coming out saying, please explain, why haven't you paid your super? Now you can see one of the things to be aware of to avoid getting those letters is making sure that the super gets paid on time. Because there's certainly some people who say, well, the superannuation is due on this date, so one day before it's due, I'm going to send my payments through. But maybe it only gets to the super fund 3 or 4 days later, so the super fund will be reporting it late. But they'll report it in the next quarter, and the ATO data matching will then say, well, you haven't paid your super. Now, the things to be aware of there for the for-profit entities is if you don't pay the super on time, it's not deductible, so you end up having an higher tax bill, which can be an issue. But even for not-for-profit entities, you still need to meet your obligations, and that obligation to pay super is met when the money gets to the super fund, not when it leaves your bank account. So especially if you're using a super clearinghouse, which quite a few organisations do, you have to be aware that you might send the money to the clearinghouse, it might sit with the clearinghouse for a week or 10 days before it then gets passed through to the employee's super fund. So especially at 30 June, you want to be making sure that you pay your super early enough that it can get through the clearinghouse and to the super fund before the due date. The one exception to that is for those of you, if you do use the small business super clearinghouse, which is the ATO clearinghouse, your obligation's met when the money gets to the clearinghouse, not when it gets to the super fund. But even then, if it gets to the super fund late, you're still going to get that please explain letter, which you'd probably much rather avoid having to deal with. Amending mistakes. Yes, there's all that data matching going on and there'll be some please explain letters coming out, but don't stress too much, because if you upload data that's wrong or you make errors, there are ways to fix it. So you can either use the tool that they call a fix, where you just upload an amended file, or when you submit a subsequent payment summary, you're able to upload amended year-to-date figures. Sorry, when you upload a pay event of a Single Touch Payroll, you can upload amended year-to-date figures. So either way, it gives you that ability to let the ATO know that there's been an error made. They've got the functionality to allow that to work. As long as you don't end up with staff on negative salaries, it should all go through reasonably well, but you just want to keep an eye on that. There is also a full file replacement, so if you've really uploaded something that is so incredibly wrong, you can actually upload a replacement file. Now, hopefully the software systems sort of avoid too many of these issues, but it's more likely to come with coding type things. So maybe you paid someone, it was meant to be a motor vehicle allowance, you coded as salary and wages, you want to go through and re-upload that and advise the ATO no, it was actually a car allowance and not salary wages. And what the ATO have said to us is that they will adopt a supportive and tailored approach. Hopefully what that means is if you make mistakes, especially in the first years of Single Touch Payroll, don't stress too much. They're not intending to issue fines or things like that, but rather that it's meant to be this idea of helping people to be able to comply. They haven't guaranteed that they're necessarily going to do that down the track, but certainly for the first year, they're trying to encourage people to comply, rather than coming out with a bit more carrot, a bit less stick to begin with. So what does it replace? This is the good news out of it, because there's actually some things you're currently doing you can stop doing. This is the bit where you're allowed to smile. I know it's really boring, but there's meant to be some good news here. Employee onboarding. You know that whole process where you got the paper form, the tax file number declaration, the super choice form, you gave it to your employee, 3 weeks later they'd started working, they hadn't given it back, you said, where is it? Oh, the dog ate it, you give them a new one, and then hopefully 6 months later you've got that form with the tax file number, or maybe if you did the right thing when it got to the 28 days and you didn't have the tax file number and you started withholding their pay at 50%, and then they came and said, why is my pay so low? And then they finally filled it in. They're trying to make that process a little bit easier for all of us. So there's now the option that staff are actually able to, if you've advised them to go into their MyGov account, put in your ABN and your default super fund numbers, pick a few things from a few drop boxes, and that will then actually allow them the employee to advise the ATO directly of the details on that TFN declaration and the super choice form, and then they just print it out and give it to the employer as an advice to say, here's what I've already told the ATO. Now, by then logging into MyGov and printing it out, you avoid the issues where they write the TFN so illegibly that you can't actually make it out. Hopefully with things like choosing the super fund, they'll have that functionality that the super fund accounts that the employee currently has will be there in a drop-down list. So it encourages them to use a fund they've already got, rather than people ending up with 6 different funds with $100 or $150 in each fund. There's also some changes in your regular reporting and your annual reporting. So let's go through those quickly. So the employee onboarding, as I said, TFN declarations, withholding declarations, Medicare levy, variation declarations, the super choice form can all be done through that process. So because it's a new ATO process, there's a little bit of, will it actually work? You know how many times the ATO says they're going to do something and how well it actually works. But if they do what they've said, that's the process we're going to have there. The regular reporting, so the pay slips that you have to either give to your staff or make available to your staff, that doesn't change. You still have to make a pay slip available to your staff every pay run. But in terms of your BAS reporting, they're saying in another year's time that there'll be pre-filling of the wages information on your BAS. So to begin with, they're going to be doing a data matching approach, that what you advise through Single Touch Payroll as gross wages, is that the same as what you put on your BAS? Down the track, the next step after that is then going to be your Single Touch Payroll details pre-filling in the BAS for you. So, one less number you have to type in, hopefully. And annual reporting, so for Single Touch Payroll, you're still going to have to make a finalisation declaration at the end of the year. So even though every pay run, every week, every month, you're uploading this detail to the ATO, come the end of the year, you have to go through a process of checking that you're happy with it, and then you hit the finalise button. That is what will then allow the staff members to do their own individual tax returns. They'll see it through MyGov as finalised information. And in terms of the timeframes for that, most people are used to this idea that you've got until 14 July to give your payment summaries to your staff. So for this year, in terms of finalising your Single Touch Payroll, you've got an extension through until the 31st of July. A little bit more time. But after that, it'll go back to the 14th of July. Now you do, with the finalisation process, it's a per employee process. So you do actually have that ability that maybe you have an employee that leaves you during the year. You can actually finalise their Single Touch Payroll information when they depart, rather than waiting to the end of the year. So on that day when you've got their redundancy calculation on the table in front of you, you're busy looking at the numbers, you know they're leaving, you're not expecting them to come back, you can actually log in, hit finalise, and 6 months later at the end of the year, you don't have to worry about them anymore. So maybe there's some benefit in that. And still remember, you can even actually edit finalised records. So even if you go and finalise it, and then you realise you made a mistake, you can go and unfinalise the record and then make a change and re-finalise it. And there'll be a process where the ATO will then, after that, go and amend the tax returns and so on. But you want to try and avoid that if you can, but just know that there is that option if you really, really need it.
For staff that come and go, you wouldn't finalise them, would you?
You don't have to finalise, and if you've got a staff member who is sort of working sometimes and you kind of expect them to work a month, maybe leave, then come another month, then leave, then so you can just wait to the end of the year and then finalise.
But then at the end of the year you have to finalise them? Even
Yes.
if you expect...
So the finalising is an annual process. So think of the finalising a little bit like giving the PAYG payment summary. So it's related to that one financial year, and it's saying, yes, the information of what we've paid for this year is correct and complete. The staff member can now do their individual tax return.
I have a client who engages backpackers, and we've had times where they're the last employer before they leave Australia, so we've had to give them the payment summary. So what you're suggesting is we can just finalise that one employee.
You can.
That's how that function works.
Correct. So
same as we do currently for that just one payment summary for that. So it's a similar process.
Yeah, very, very similar. So you do, if you've got that backpacker who maybe it's November, they're finishing up, they're heading overseas, they want to do their final tax return, then you can actually finalise it. They can log into their MyGov account, they can do their tax return, and it has no impact on the other staff. For reportable fringe benefits, you also have the ability to report those through Single Touch Payroll, but it's not mandatory yet. So if you want to, you can still do a payment summary with only the reportable fringe benefits amount on it, no salary or wages, and have the salary and wages in Single Touch Payroll. Why you'd want to do that, I'm not quite sure, but the ability is there. Or you can put reportable fringe benefits through Single Touch Payroll, so you've got that option either way. In terms of transitioning, if you haven't changed yet, changing to Single Touch Payroll on 1 July is certainly going to be the easiest date because you don't have to worry about rollovers, change of information and so on. But if you're going to do it midway through a year, you can do it. And so whether you're changing payroll softwares or you're going from what you were doing to just turning on Single Touch Payroll within the same software or some combination thereof, all of that's available and possible. And you've essentially got that option when you implement the new software of the software will give you a couple of tick boxes to choose whether you might have lodged Single Touch Payroll data under your old software, and then under your new software you might say, well, I'm not going to lodge the old data, I'm just going to start lodging the new data going forward. Or in the old software you can submit an amendment to zero out what you've lodged, and then in your new software lodge year-to-date figures. So the ability is there depending what your preference is, but if you want to avoid all of that, just start doing it from 1 July going forward. Then you're doing one full financial year on payment summaries, the next full financial year in Single Touch Payroll to make your life a little bit easier.
Alistair, is there a time in the future where there's like an expectation that it will only be Single Touch and that MyGov will be, the way for all Australians to basically do that?
Yes, so the expectation is the ATO are moving everything to Single Touch Payroll. So at the moment they've sort of done it in that staged approach where 1 July 18 it was larger employers, the 20 employees and up. 1 July 19 it's below 19 employees. There's a couple of categories for closely held employees or the small businesses deferrals that give you another 1 or 2 years before you have to do Single Touch Payroll. And then after that, they're really pushing everyone to say everyone should be reporting through Single Touch Payroll. Payment summaries aren't going to be there. That might still take a little while because there's a few things you can't do in Single Touch Payroll. So for instance, superannuation funds, so maybe you might deal with a self-managed super fund that pays a pension stream to the members, or a larger fund where you're making payments to members, or some insurance payouts if you're doing accounting for an insurer. There are some payments like that that cannot be lodged through Single Touch Payroll yet. So the ATO still has to work through that and move all of those, so it'll still be a few years.
And so does the ATO, and I guess it's Centrelink, I suppose, that whole MyGov, all those agencies that kind of link in MyGov. Are you aware if there's any focused sort of training, awareness raising over the next few years to actually support communities to move to that in that direction?
In terms of training for employees how to use this system, I'm not really aware of very much that's there. There's a little bit of information on the ATO website, a couple of recorded webinar type things or handouts,
Yeah.
but they're there, but they almost seem to be at this stage pushing it to employers, where the ATO is saying to the employer, please let your employees know about this. As the employer, you need to tell your staff about this. You need to tell your staff they need to use MyGov. But as to how to use MyGov, I guess maybe they're sort of going with that approach of, it's so simple, it's intuitive, right? We don't need lessons on how to use it.
I guess in warm, I'm just not thinking about our employees, and that would be, that's a huge activity just to even get our staff on MyGov. But I'm also thinking the wider community, where we absolutely struggle through no fault of the communities to get people registered in MyGov. So it's not, I can see that taking a minimum of 5 years to actually do that. So
No, you're right that there are some people that will have more difficulty with MyGov, and I guess at the moment the ATO's approach to it is simply to say, if you're not using MyGov, use a tax accountant or a tax agent to assist you, and if you don't use either of those, phone up and talk to the ATO to get your information to fill out your tax return paper form for those few people that do. But at the moment they haven't really got much more than that.
I think you're right. They very much assume that everyone is saving this internet and assumes everyone got an email address and which you need to have to get on MyGov
and identification.
And some people don't have email address also.
Yeah.
No, you can't use someone else's email address.
And one of the things that the ATO has said that as part of this process, if you have a employee's email address as part of your software or your Single Touch Payroll reporting, they will use that to help match your data with the employee's data. So when you're uploading it, as in when you're uploading your Single Touch Payroll data, what the tax file number is going to the ATO, but also the employee's email address. Now, the employee's email address is not mandatory. The ATO has not made it a mandatory field, but some of the softwares will make it mandatory. What the ATO has said in their guidance is, please make sure that you're using a valid, correct email address and an email address that does actually belong to that employee. So if it's someone who doesn't have an email address, don't put someone else's email address in their payroll information, because it could cause issues with the data matching system, because especially if the tax file number is wrong or there's some other reason why the ATO can't automatically match your Single Touch Payroll data through to that employee, they'll look at the email address as a secondary identifier, and if they can match the email address to a particular person or to a MyGov account, they'll use that to help link the data. So if you're paying people who don't have an email address, don't put an email address in the software, or don't put example@example.com. It's going to create issues.
What about if they use in their payroll system like a work email, not their actual personal one? Would that cause any conflicts when they then go onto MyGov with their personal email and it's not matching up?
If it's a shared email address, potentially. If it's an email address that they're the only person using, then the likelihood is that that email address will not be linked to any records with the ATO, and hopefully not linked to anyone else. I guess I'm imagining the situation where if you've got an email address like reception at whatever it is, or info at, there could be a staff member who used that address with the ATO a few years ago. They've left, you've got a new staff member in who's now using that email address, so there's the potential for conflicts there, but perhaps less likely. So, just a couple of screenshots to show you how easy it is to set up. Now, These ones are taken out of the Xero accounting software. If you're someone who uses a different software, you're using Mile, different colour, pretty much the same screen. If you're using Reckon, different colour, pretty much the same screen. The process is going to be very similar, so I've just used Xero screenshots as an example. You click the button that says, I want to start using Single Touch Payroll. It brings you to a screen